Hello everybody, my name is Necroxis. We're going to be doing a little bit of a different video, but it's something that I used to do a little bit more frequently, but I want to bring back. So, 8.1, the Tides of Vengeance patch for World of Warcraft is coming out in just over a week on Tuesday, December 11th. So I wanted to give my opinions on what I think are the good and the bad of the patch, and I want to talk about a very specific topic, and I want to say right at the top, this isn't me complaining about 8.1. In fact, as you're going to hear me talk about, I think most of what we're getting in the patch is great content. But the issue that I have, and the reason I'm making this video, is because I think Blizzard, whether intentionally or not, has been kind of deceptively masking how ultimately little content there is in the patch. And I want people to be aware of what is actually coming on December 11th before you give them your money and resubscribe. And ultimately, I think at the end of this video, I hope you understand why I'm going to state that the entire point of the video that I'm making right now, I'm going to let you know what the point is that I'm going toward the whole time, is that I don't think, unless you haven't played Battle for Azeroth at all, I don't think you should resubscribe on December 11th. I think you should probably wait until it gets closer to around February, when the Dazar'alor raid comes out, before you actually resubscribe to the game. Especially in this holiday season, I think you guys should save your money and just wait for a lot of the time-gated stuff to just completely unlock before you end up subscribing on December 11th, inevitably play it, and do the hour and a half of content, and then have to go back to the normal 8.0 grind. So, I do want to say there won't be spoilers for most of the storyline in this video, except for one part at the end, and I will put up a little thing right here in the corner when I'm talking about it. I'll also give you a warning ahead of time. But at first, I want to just go over what we're actually getting in 8.1. I'm not going to be covering literally everything. Like, for example, I'm not going to be covering the new Azurite traits, even though they don't even come out until the raid launches, so it's not really relevant anyway. But I'm not going to be covering that. I'm not really going to be covering PvP or class changes, or the experience change, which basically they've made it easier to level up from 1 to 110, and that's basically it. So I'm going to cover everything else. So to get started, the war campaign is concluding like Blizzard said it would, and like it says in the game right now. In 8.1, there's going to be 5 new quests for the war campaign. However, the final quest is not going to be available until the Battle of Dazar'alor raid comes out. And as I'll talk about in a little bit, that's most likely not going to come out until the end of February. So you're going to have 4 quest chains that are going to be unlocking starting on December 11th. We have no idea what the time gate is going to be on these things, but based on previous Blizzard actions and how they've done these kind of things, this is very likely going to be time gated. So yeah, like I said, there's 5 parts. The 5th part directly mentions spoilers of the raid, so obviously that's not going to be out until the raid's completed. Otherwise, chronologically, it makes no sense. So there's going to be 4 parts leading up to the raid. I assume part 1 will be available on December 11th. But a problem is that Blizzard hasn't given us a schedule, so we're kind of just left in the dark, not sure what to do, which kind of feeds into my point earlier about them being a little bit deceptive about what actually is unlocking on December 11th. So I kind of want to give you guys all of the information that I know, and then give you my opinion on it so you can make an informed decision. So, besides the war campaign, which, you know, both factions are getting 5 parts, by the way. So, there we go. Incursions. Incursions are very similar to Legion invasions if you played in the last expansion. And essentially, small events will pop up in specific zones from time to time that offer a moderate amount, a little bit more than the other current grinds in the game of Azurite, as well as the promise of a not insignificant amount of experience from Blizzard's end. They have said that Incursions could be used as an alternative for leveling, but once again, the problem is they haven't been specific on how much experience they're going to give, or how can you possibly level with Incursions, because much like Legion invasions, once you complete the 4 quests and then do the end event, they're over for you for the most part. So I'm very confused as to how they think you're going to be able to level with Incursions. Also, I will say, if you start a fresh 110 to level with just Incursions, you're going to be missing out on a lot of endgame content in 8.0 because you need to have done each zone's storyline to unlock things like basic world quests and the war campaign of 8.0 and the Jaina quest chain for the Alliance or the Vol'jin quest chain for the Horde. You have to have completed the basic storyline of each zone. So I guess if you're making an alt that doesn't care about that, but you get like significant amounts of Azerite and significant amounts of gear through those, so I don't know why you wouldn't do them. So it's very confusing, but that incursions are essentially, in this version of Battle for Azeroth, if you're the Horde, the Alliance is going to show up in your zone, and they're going to take over all your world quests, and it's, oh, the Alliance is attacking our zone, go there and complete 4 world quests that have been changed and are now themed about the Alliance, and once you do it, you're going to have like a final little event where you go and destroy the airship that's attacking or destroy the base that showed up. And for the Horde, for the Alliance, it's the same thing with the Horde. So, those are incursions. Those are coming in 8.0. Presumably, they're launching on December 11th, but once again, we have no time frame, so who knows. There are a few new quest chains that are unlocking, although weirdly, both of these are for Horde only, and the Alliance doesn't seem to have their own version of this, but, you know, there is a Saurfang quest chain that is unlocking for the Horde, that continues the story of Saurfang following the Lost Honor cinematic that they showed off at BlizzCon, which I'm not going to spoil here if you haven't seen it, because this is the no spoilers part, but it takes place directly after that, and you see what's going on with Saurfang. Furthermore, there is also a Vol'jin quest chain in the game that is continuing Vol'jin's storyline from 8.0, where he is trying to figure out a mystery that if you have done his quest chain in 8.0, you can probably guess where it's going, but that is also coming in 8.1. Once again, we have no idea if either of these two quest chains are launching on December 11th. I don't actually know, so I can't say for sure that they are. But Darkshore is also coming out. Darkshore is a Warfront, and it is being added as the new big content grind, I guess, in 8.1. It's a Warfront much like Stromgarde is. You're going to have to build up your resources. You're going to have to do exactly the same thing that you do for Stromgarde, which is, you know, turn in the things to build up the bar, to unlock the event, play the event while the other faction can do dailies, and then it flips back and forth. Darkshore is the new Warfront. It's being added, and with it comes a 20 to 25 minute introduction quest chain that is unique to each side. The Alliance one follows Tyrande, the Horde one is with Nathanos, and it ultimately cultivates with the Alliance getting and unlocking a new alternate version for the Night Elves. Now, to go back to what I was just saying about the two Saurfang and the Vol'jin quest chains, it's weird to me that Blizzard seems to imply that the Tyrande quest chain is somehow equivalent to the Saurfang one, but it's not. Because that would imply that the Horde don't have their own version of that quest chain, but they do. The Tyrande quest chain revolving Darkshore is just the introduction to Darkshore, and the Horde have their own introduction to Darkshore. Comparatively, you have the Saurfang and the Vol'jin quest chains, which are different, they're not related, and they are their own unique experience, and the Alliance don't have their own two unique experience quest chains. So, I've defended, you know, in 8.0 we had the extra Saurfang cinematic that came out, and, you know, I was totally fine with it, and I defended it from people complaining that there's Horde bias. But I have to admit, I am getting a little annoyed now that there seem to be two distinct quest chains just for the Horde storyline that, by their very nature, are going to continue. Like, the Saurfang and the Vol'jin storylines, without spoiling it, don't end in 8.1. That's continuing, obviously, into the overall expansion storyline. So, it's just confusing me as to why they're doing that. And, again, ties into this idea of this deception about what the actual content is, and I don't know why it's necessary to kind of mislead people in that way. But anyway, to go forward, another feature that's coming in 8.1 is Heritage Armor. Not only allied races are getting Heritage Armor anymore, now the actual core races are getting them as well. In 8.1, we're getting Dwarven and Blood Elf Heritage Armor. To be eligible for this, if you haven't heard yet, you have to, A, have a character that is that race at 120, so either you need a level 120 dwarf or 120 blood elf, and also on those specific characters you need to have your home reputation, which for the dwarf is Ironforge and for the blood elf is Silvermoon. You have to have them at Exalted. A quick tip about grinding old school reputations of any kind, but it also works here, is that an easy way to hit Exalted within a few hours, even if you're at neutral, which if you've been playing your character, you should probably be at least halfway through Honored or at Honored. But an easy way to get Exalted in a few hours is to grind the Mechanar dungeon in Netherstorm. It takes about 6 to 7 minutes to complete, and awards around 2,000 to 3,000 reputation apiece. And after you finish it, you can leave, right-click your portrait in the corner, reset the instance, and do it again. Make sure, though, before you do that, and before you go over there, I even knew this and I forgot, and I was doing this yesterday to grind for the Ironforge one, but make sure you head to that faction city and talk to their vendor and pick up the tabard. So for the Alliance, the Horde tabard is at the Ironforge Flightmaster, and for the... or did I say Horde? For the Alliance, the Ironforge tabard is at their vendor at the Ironforge Flightmaster, and for Blood Elves, you have to go to the Silvermoon Flightmaster outside of the city, and there is a vendor standing there who sells you kind of the mount and a bunch of other... a bag and a cloak and some other fluff, but they also sell the tabard for them. So make sure you pick up the tabard, and then go to the Mechanar in Netherstorm. If you're looking at Tempest Keep from like this direction, and Tempest Keep is in front of you, the Mechanar is the rightmost dungeon. It's the one that there's only one of, whereas the other side has the 2 dungeons. So go to the Mechanar, run it with the tabard. It's very, very quick, especially with the Darkmoon Fair coming up. You can also get the 10% reputation increase buff, and then go do it. It'll make it even faster. I was doing it with the Warcraft 14th anniversary buff, which is 14% increased reputation, but that's a very easy way to grind some reputation. It also works for basically any other faction that has tabards, and even if you're not wearing a tabard, it also gives you reputation for the Shatar, which is the Burning Crusade reputation, in case you wanted to grind that for some reason. So, just FYI, it's a very easy way to get the reputation up. Alright, the next thing that's coming in 8.1 is Island Expeditions are being updated. 2 new island expeditions are being added, Jorndal and Havenswood. Blizzard is also updating and adding new features for the island expeditions, including 2 new features that you can do while playing them. One of them is an Azerite extractor, which means you find the extractor on the island, you enable it, and then defend it, and throughout the rest of the expedition, as long as you control it, it slowly trickles in more Azerite for you, letting you complete the expedition more quickly. There's another one called a Holdout, which we don't have as much information about, but it seems to be you can find an area on the map, activate the Holdout, and then just waves of enemies will try to attack and kill you, and the more that you complete it, the more Azerite you get, and these 2 things reward more Azerite at a quicker pace than the other ways to do on the island expeditions. They've also said they're updating the island expeditions so that it's not as grindy and it takes a little bit less time to complete. So if that's something you're interested in, great. And finally, the raids. There's a reason that I didn't mention the Battle of Dazar'alor or the Crucible of Stormrains in their entirety here. And it's because, and I want to be clear, because I feel like a lot of people never know this, and every time I bring it up, people are like, oh, really? The raids are not coming out on December 11th. Neither raid is unlocking then. And Blizzard has basically said that they're happy with how the raid release schedule has worked in Legion, which, if you don't know, it's about 5 months between the raids. And that's kind of holding true of all of Legion. So, assuming that is true based on their words for Battle for Azeroth, that means that the Battle for Dazar'alor won't be released until the end of February, at the very earliest. And furthermore, the Crucible of Storms, which is the smaller 2-man or 2-boss raid, isn't going to be releasing at the same time as the Battle of Dazar'alor, so it'll be out even later than that. So the reason I didn't bring this up is because these things are not coming out on December 11th, and I feel like Blizzard and a lot of the big places that cover this news, they like to leave out the fact that the raid is not actually part of the content patch, while also then advertising the content patch with assets and stuff from the raid, which again feeds into my argument that this seems kind of deceptive a little bit. So, there we go. The raids aren't coming out on December 11th. So, that's all we're getting in 8.1 that is important, in my opinion. So now let's get into what I want to talk about regarding the patch. So, I do briefly want to talk about some storyline stuff, so this will be spoilers. So if you don't want to, just skip ahead until you no longer see the little thing at the bottom of the screen right here. I'm going to put up a little warning. So, here we go. 3, 2, 1. I briefly want to touch on some story stuff because while there is interesting story content coming up in this new patch, I feel like they're spending quite a bit of time setting things up for the future patch, which is fine as an expansion whole story. It does feel a bit unsatisfying playing just the patch before the expansion's done, because a decent amount of development is being given in a patch for stuff that doesn't end in this patch. A good example is the Horde spends one of their only 5 quest chains on the war campaign breaking out Lady Ashvane from Tol Dagor. I always mix up how you pronounce that. Tol Dagor, the dungeon, because of Sylvanas. You know, because the Horde and Sylvanas definitely aren't the villains in Battle for Azeroth. But this ultimately goes nowhere in 8.1, and you kind of just have to wait to see what happens with this, which obviously is going to come up in probably 8.2 with Dazar'alor. And I'm not saying the quest and the story is bad, but spending only one of the 5 quest chains you get doing something that doesn't pay off in this one patch is kind of unsatisfying, if that makes sense. At least that's how I felt about it. Furthermore, like I was saying earlier, the finale of both of the war campaigns requires the raid to be out, and the reason that it does is because the Horde one directly references the death of Rastakhan, while the Alliance one directly references Mekatork being frozen in his state, which is basically he's essentially dead at the moment, but frozen in ice. And obviously, for chronology's sake, you have to have done the raid, otherwise they're not going to bring this up, because you'll have no idea what it's talking about, because the death of Rastakhan and the freezing of Mekatork only take place in the raid. So, obviously, the raid has to come out for the last part of the war campaign to complete. So, for the Horde, you only have 3 quests that really are related to the story of the expansion without having to wait until the end of February. And for the Alliance, like I was saying earlier with the Tyrande stuff, Blizzard seems to be implying that the Tyrande thing is a unique storyline to the Alliance that doesn't have a comparative quest chain to the Horde, but it does. So it's very confusing. Also, the story of the Warfront leading up to it, while it is very interesting and I do like it, it doesn't go anywhere because it ties into the Warfront, which has no canonical ending as of this moment. So, I'm bringing all this up not to say, like I said at the beginning of the video, that 8.1 is bad. Also, the spoilers aren't done, if you're curious, just to be safe. I'm not bringing this up to say 8.1 is bad. As I said at the beginning of the video, I like very much almost everything we're getting. But I just want to let people know that the most you'll be able to do on day 1 probably are only 3 things. You'll be able to do the first quest of the war campaign, you'll be able to do the introduction of the Darkshore Warfront, and you'll be able to do the Heritage Armor. But there are 2 asterisks on those last 2 things. If you're the Horde, you don't even get to play the Warfront because the Alliance is the first one working toward it. And if you're the Alliance, the Warfront's not even active right away. You have to build up to it by doing the turn-ins. So, you'll be able to do, probably, even if you can only do all 3 of these things, that's also assuming that you have a level 120 Blood Elf and Dwarf, and you're exalted with both of the factions. But let's just assume you have all 3 of those things. The most duration that you're going to be able to play is probably an hour and a half to 2 hours of content, and then after that, you're going to go back right to the same old grind that you've been doing for all of 8.0. We have no idea, when the Sarfang or the Vol'jin storylines are unlocking, or if they're available on December 11th. It's all but certain that the war campaign, based on Blizzard's previous actions, are going to be time-gated. However, even if all 4 parts were available on December 11th, you can't even complete it until the raid comes up. So, to end this video, I want to talk about time gating. I've been publicly opposed to how Blizzard has operated since Worlds of Draenor, and I'm going to continue doing so here. I think the idea that Blizzard is gating the content for our benefit, so that we don't complete it all at once and have nothing else to do, is just kind of a deceptive smokescreen that hides the fact that ultimately, without the raid, 8.1 doesn't actually have a large amount of content. What they do is good, but there isn't a whole bunch of it, to be honest. I've seen some various arguments between members of the community of the content creators on YouTube and Twitch regarding whether or not Blizzard should release all of the patch content at once or not. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to make it seem like this is me trying to stir up drama for attention, because both of these parties have far larger audiences than I do. So I want to actually talk about this from an analysis point of view. But I do kind of have to explain what the two disagreements are. So one of the parties, let's say that he's a Twitch streamer who tends to hate on most of what Blizzard does, is saying that the fact that 8.1 is time-gated is bad because current Blizzard just wants your money for the least amount of content, while the other party, let's say that they're YouTubers who tend to defend almost everything Blizzard does, tried to say that the other person was a hypocrite or they were setting up a claim of hypocrisy by asking him if he wanted Classic to release all of the patches at once when it launches that. I fall in the middle here. I think both arguments on both sides are very fallacious in what they're trying to ask for, and it's because the right conversation isn't happening on this topic. There's a huge difference between the content of a single patch and an entire expansion. A patch is assumed to have a contained story that has a beginning, a middle, and end. At least the good patches do. Like Landfall, for example, 5.1, which I'll be talking about more in a second. While an expansion storyline is expected to unfold over time. It's like comparing reading a book in a series to the entire series itself. I've recently been rereading A Song of Ice and Fire, and the most apt comparison I can make is that I can read and appreciate A Dance with Dragons, which is the 5th book out of the 7-book series. I can appreciate A Dance with Dragons in its entirety while also understanding that the storyline isn't finished. The book A Dance with Dragons has its own arc and its own beginning, middle, and ending, and a satisfying conclusion to the story, even though the entire story of the whole series isn't done. In my opinion, the appreciation of the narrative as a whole of a patch gets lost in WoW when even the patch itself has its story time-gated, versus the natural time-gating of an entire expansion based on game development, if that makes sense. So to repeat myself, it's assumed that the entire storyline of an expansion isn't going to be finished until the entire expansion's done. While good patches in this game in the past have had a beginning, middle, and end, even if that end dovetails off into the rest of the storyline, or the rest of the expansion storyline. So I'd very much rather Blizzard do what they used to do, which is to gate the content by reputation instead of time. They did try to do this a little bit in Legion with the Nightfallen, but I feel like they were double dipping with having the gating being both reputation-based and time-based. You had to grind Nightfallen reputation to get to the next parts of the story, but only when that story was artificially unlocked at a certain time. Compare this now to my favorite patch, and I've made no secret, which in WoW, which is 5.1, Landfall. The entire thing was out when the patch 5.1 launched, but it was gated behind reputation requirements. You had to meet certain reputation levels before the next part of the storyline unlocks. This may seem to be the same as artificially time gates unlocking the story at certain dates, but it's not. The difference is subtle but enormous. The difference is that it encouraged players to log on every day and do the daily quests for 5.1. Because if they did, they got to see the content sooner. They got to see the story sooner. I was excited to wake up on days I didn't have work or school and play 5.1 the first thing I did in the day, to try and see if I can unlock the next part of the story, of the Landfall storyline. Now, it did take a couple of days between the next story quest chains, but it was based on how I played. If I didn't play every day, it would take me longer to unlock those story quest chains. Compare this now to Battle for Azeroth, where everyone gets stopped at specific times, and the next part doesn't unlock until arbitrary dates. So ultimately, then what I would do in Battle for Azeroth is I would do the war campaign, and then I would just stop playing for a number of days until the next part unlocked. Because otherwise all I had left to do was an endless Azerite grind that I could never finish. So the two options here, and it seems very obvious which one they should go with, are A, have players enthusiastically log on and play the game every day so that they could get the reputation to then unlock the next parts of the storyline, or B, arbitrarily stop everybody at specific times and then make them wait until specific dates to unlock it, so that then some players, like myself, would just stop playing the game entirely until the next part unlocks. The choice kind of seems obvious to me, and this doesn't really even require more game development time or resources. Just tie it to reputation instead of time gates. And I just don't understand why they're never doing it. So, in the end, that choice seems obvious to me, but in the end, I think if you do return on December 11th, unless you haven't played Battle for Azeroth at all, I think you're going to be disappointed when you finish all the new things to do in about an hour and a half. And I would much rather that you save your money, especially during the holiday season, and instead wait until all the time gates are unlocked and finished, and wait for the raid to be closer to released, which will probably be around mid-February before you resubscribe. And for a third time, I'm not saying this because I think 8.1 is bad, or because I want to punish Blizzard. But I say this because I don't think there's actually a ton to do on launch day of 8.1. It's like when people came back for 7.3, the Argus patch, they did the entire quest chain that was available in like an hour, and then they had nothing else to do but grind world quests. And even then, when you finished all the world quests, there was literally nothing left else to do. And people had to wait for another week for the next part to unlock. My sole goal with this channel is to both entertain you and try and inform you on my perspective and a product you have to pay for, because due to what I've been doing here on the channel, I've had the privilege of having a lot of things for World of Warcraft paid for on my behalf. Like I said before in the previous videos, I've had Blizzard give me 2 free years of subscription time based on some work I did for them back in January, editing and recording stuff. And I actually had a very generous subscriber donate another year's subscription to me. So I'm subscribed through like 2020, so I can see all this content ahead of time, and I'm not actually paying for it myself. So if I can tell you guys what's coming up that you don't have to spend your money on, because there's not ultimately a lot right at the launch, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be honest, because I want you guys to get the most out of your buck for this game. So, again, I personally recommend, unless you haven't played Battle for Azeroth like at all, like if you don't have a max level character and you want to see a lot of the 8.0 stuff, which is now all unlocked, then I would recommend not resubscribing until probably February. Pay attention to when the raid's going to be coming out. We don't actually know because there's no date yet, but pay attention to when the raid's actually coming out, the Battle of Dazar'alor raid, and then subscribe closer to that instead of on December 11th. So that's my opinion on 8.1. In a nutshell, I think a lot of it's really great, but I don't think that there's actually a lot of it, and that I think Blizzard's kind of being deceptive with how much is actually coming out on December 11th. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments below, but thanks for watching, and have a great rest of your holiday. If I don't have a video up since then, have a great Christmas and a great New Year. Be safe, be great to each other, and yeah, I will see you guys soon. Thanks for watching. Farewell.